My name is Angie France. I am with Prestige Senior Living. We have independent living, assisted living, and memory care communities throughout the Pacific Northwest in Washington and Oregon. And I am joined today by our Director of Sales and Marketing, Marissa Gardner, and as well as our presenter today, Christina Meyer. And so we are so happy to have all of you with us, and we hope that you will understand a little bit more about the mental wellness journey in aging. So, as we have determined, and most of us around the world, since COVID, mental health has really been on the minds of so many people. We're hearing more and more about it. And so, we also acknowledge in our senior population the importance of understanding. And we have found too that, we have served the silent generation for so many years, those who grew up around World War II and didn't really talk about things that were involved in their own life, especially mental health. And so now we're seeing a new urge to be able to talk about those things and seeing the impact of mental wellness on our aging population. And so we're really grateful as a company at Prestige to be able to share information, to be a resource for you. And we hope that you will take away from this webinar today some helpful information for you, whether you think you're aging or not. And I do say that we age from the day we are born, so it's relevant to all of us. But we are really grateful to have Christina Meyer with us today to be able to present. And we look forward to hearing from her and all that she has for us. I do want to give you a little bit of information on Christina. Christina is a licensed clinical social worker with a background in medical social work, and she has a passion for supporting older adults and those who care for them. And we know there are many in-home care persons and partners that we work with. And so, with almost tens of years of experience helping individuals and families navigate through the emotional challenges of aging, she takes a really compassionate and down-earth approach to meeting the needs of those that she works with. Her work focuses primarily on promoting mental wellness, strengthening connections, and then also providing tools for individuals to work through the process. In our presentation today, Christina shares insights to help older adults, families, and care teams thrive together. And so we are looking forward to hearing from you today, Christina. We also want to let everyone know that this session is being recorded. And so we will be sending out a recording of this, as well as Christina's slides that she put together. We will have some time at the end for a Q&A. And so if you have any questions along the webinar, please feel free to put those in the Q&A or in the chat at the bottom of your screen, or maybe at the top of your screen. And so welcome to everyone today. And Christina, I'm going to let you share your screen and take it from here. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Angie. That was a great introduction. I'm Christina, as Angie had mentioned. Let me pull up my slides here, and we should be able to get started. Okay, excellent. So as Angie mentioned today, we're going to be talking a little bit about mental wellness in the aging experience. We're going to cover a lot of different things. We're going to talk about, warning signs, risk factors, and some of the things you could do to keep yourself mentally well. So I'm really excited for this presentation. All right. So I love this quote by Glenn Close. What mental health needs is more sunlight, more candor, and more unashamed conversation. And I love this because mental health is so important to talk about. We talk about our physical health all the time, right? I have a headache, my legs hurt, my arms hurt. I went to the doctor for this, that, or the other. But it's rare to hear people talk about mental health, but it's just as important as physical health. So I loved this because it points out that we do need to talk about mental health. It's so, so important to be able to break down that stigma of mental health. So why does mental health matter? I mean, the basics of it is so that people can get the support they need to feel better. But some of the statistics are that 14% of adults age 60 plus have a mental health condition. That's a really big chunk of adults, right? So this is according to the World Health Organization. So that's looking at across the globe. So that's a pretty high number. The other statistic I would like to point out is people who are age 85 plus are at higher risk of depression and suicide. And they're, I believe, at highest risk for depression and suicide. So it's really, really important that we start talking about mental health early so people feel like they can reach out for help when they do need help. As I said, mental health is just as important as physical health. Um, it's not a normal part of aging. A lot of times you will see in articles and books, people will say, oh, it's just a part of aging. You become more depressed, you become, more anxious, or you sleep less, and so you're going to feel worse. But it's not a normal part of aging, right? It unfortunately happens because of how sometimes our society treats older adults. So, it's not a normal part of aging, and it does warrant getting some extra help sometimes. And the really big thing that we see a lot in older adults is loneliness, depression, anxiety, and grief. Loneliness, because oftentimes people are at home alone because their kids or family members have kind of built their own lives and aren't able to visit very often, or they're in assisted living facilities, skilled nursing facilities. And so loneliness can come up because there may not be familiar people around for that person to spend time with. And loneliness can turn into depression as well. But there's lots of reasons that depression can pop up. Depression oftentimes shows up um, when individuals uh, are not enjoying how life is going for them, right? Maybe somebody has been moved out of their home, right? That's always a big, big, big transition for people is moving out of their home into an environment that they're unfamiliar with. Can also bring on anxiety. And grief is a huge one, right? As we age, we start losing people that are important to us. For example, my grandmother, she's amazing. She is going to be 93 in September, and she has lost a lot of friends and family members. And so grief has become almost part of her routine because of how many people she's lost. So, and those griefs, of course, can turn into things like depression. So it's really important that we have support available for people going through these things. So some of the risks that we see and that research has shown for older adults for mental health decline are social isolation. And that's not just um, a risk for older adults just because of moving, but also COVID played a huge role in this, right? I worked as a medical social worker in hospice when COVID hit, and many of our patients who resided in skilled nursing facilities, assisted livings, memory cares, they were unable to see their families, right? Because a lot of communities were not allowing families to come in, or were only allowing families to come, once a week or something like that. So the social isolation increased. And also because people often were quarantined into their rooms. And so there was no socialization with the other residents either. Chronic illness and chronic pain can be a risk for mental health decline. Of course, having a chronic illness is challenging, right? That means your body is pretty much always not working the way you need it to be working. And so chronic illness can certainly play into things like depression, anxiety, loneliness. Because of course, with a chronic illness, it's oftentimes hard for people without chronic illnesses to understand. Chronic pain is a huge one. If somebody has chronic pain, that means they were always uncomfortable. And if you're always uncomfortable, you're always in pain, you're going to see a mental health decline. And as I mentioned in the last slide, loss of loved ones, right? Many times when older adults get up in age, they've lost their family members, their friends, their acquaintances. So there are huge losses that come with that. And I also want to point out it's not just loss of loved ones, but various losses, right? You can also experience the loss of function in your body, losing your ability to walk or not be able to walk without assistance, losing your ability to be able to see well. Maybe again, losing your house because you have to move into a place that gives you more care. So those losses can certainly affect mental health. Cognitive decline is a huge one. Of course, if you can't remember things, if you have a hard time tracking conversations, it's going to be really hard on your mental health. So cognitive decline is a huge one we see with the older adult population. Financial stress is also a huge one, right? Care is not cheap, and oftentimes individuals are having to access different services to pay for their care. And sometimes that means having to use up the funds that you have saved up. And that financial stress can play a huge role. And lack of meaningful activity. And that becomes challenging too as we age because we can't do the things we used to do, right? Maybe you used to volunteer and you aren't able to do that anymore because your body doesn't let you. There's a lot of things that can impact that. And also, retirement, right? Your purpose may have been in your job, and then when you retire, you have lack of a meaningful activity to give you purpose. That's why it's so important when people retire to find something that gives them purpose, whether it be volunteering, maybe they have grandkids they're taking care of, lots of different things, picking up hobbies. So these are some pretty big risks that we see with older adult population. Now, it's really important that those around you and within yourself, you recognize warning signs that things may be declining with your mental health. Sadness or hopelessness. I saw this a lot working in assisted living, memory care, nursing, um, those types of situations. I saw a lot of sadness and hopelessness. People telling me, my family has passed away or my family doesn't come visit me. And I get really sad and I just don't feel like, life is happy anymore. And that's a huge warning sign that somebody may be experiencing depression. And unfortunately, in a lot of the communities that I've been in, it's treated like it's the norm. Oh, well, our residents are sad and they feel hopeless because they're here. Why wouldn't they? But nothing is done about it. So I'm really happy that Prestige is doing these types of webinars uh, because it's important for the individual as well as the people around them to recognize these warning signs. Withdrawing from activities. So maybe you have somebody who normally came to the social events at, the community they're living at, or they normally were out spending time with friends or family, and now they're starting to withdraw from that. Now they're not doing it very much or at all. That's a big warning sign for a mental health decline. Changes in sleep or appetite. Oftentimes we see with things like depression, we see either a dramatic increase in eating or a dramatic decrease. Some people do emotional eating, as they call it. And so when they're experiencing depression, they may eat more. But some people, they lose their appetite when they're feeling depressed or anxious. And so that you might notice they only eat a small portion of what's on their plate, whereas maybe before they ate the whole meal. Those are important things to notice. And of course, as we age, our appetite does get smaller, but it's important to really compare that to what is that person's baseline? What do they normally eat? And is it dramatically different? And looking at what are some of the physical things that may be going on. So if you notice those changes in sleep or changes in appetite, it's very important to talk to your doctor about that to make sure there's no biological reasons, but maybe it's a mental health issue. Changes in sleep are similar for appetite. Sometimes when people are experiencing depression or anxiety, they sleep a lot, right? I've seen people sleep 20 plus hours when experiencing depression, but they might also sleep less if they're feeling anxious about something, or even depression can cause insomnia. So maybe somebody can't fall asleep or they're waking up multiple times in the middle of the night. So paying attention to those changes, and that's not just for the people who support older adults, but the older adult as well. And increased irritability can be a big one because the brain can only handle so much emotion. Sometimes it's too much and it comes out as irritability. Or maybe that person feels very frustrated with life and it comes out in irritability. But it's really important to recognize if that irritability is increasing, that may mean something's wrong. And then expressing feelings of being a burden. I've seen this so much in my work as a medical social worker and also as a therapist. I work part-time as a therapist as well. And I often hear people saying they feel like a burden. And sometimes it's because people have told them that. Sometimes it's because that's just what they feel, right? And a lot of times there are still supports out there that are willing to help. Even if you feel like you may be a burden, there are people that love to help, love to support. And much of the time, there are people that really care about you and want to hear if there's something going on. So if a person is expressing feelings of burden, that may be an indication that there's something going on. So, how does one stay mentally well? This is one of my favorite things to talk about is how do we keep ourselves mentally well? And it shifts as we age, right? Um, as we start to get older, it's staying socially connected because oftentimes when we're up in our 60s, 70s, 80s, and up, we've likely retired or nearing retirement from our careers. And so once you retire, you don't have those 5 days a week you're going to work socializing with people, right? So then the social circle starts to get smaller and smaller. So it's important to stay socially connected, whether that be with the people that you maintain connections with, maintain friendships with, or getting involved in things in your community. There's there's senior centers in almost every city, and those senior centers often have activities, groups, those kinds of things where you can find people that you can connect with. So there's lots of options out there. And also, if you live in a community, there may be others around that want to spend time with you as well. And so engaging in those social interactions. And even if you're not one that likes to be in groups, staying connected with people one to one, maybe finding a best friend to stay connected with. Physical activity is so, so important. And this goes for any age, right? Physical activity is important to keep your body well, but it also helps so much with mental health. Physical activity helps reduce depression, it helps reduce anxiety, and it can just make you feel overall better. So physical activity isn't just about exercising to lose weight or exercising to get your heart rate up. It's also about helping your mental health. That's a super important one. And when I say physical activity, I don't mean you have to be in the gym with lifting weights. You also can do, short walks or maybe doing chair exercises, right? I used to fill in for our activities director when I worked at a assisted living facility, and I loved doing the chair exercises. Those are always fun, and it's easier on your joints, right? Keeping the brain active. This is something that has just absolutely amazed me about my grandmother, who I said is going to be 93. She loves doing puzzles. She is a always a winner at Scrabble. She has read the entire dictionary front to back, and she also reads and she loves doing crossword puzzles and things like that. So keeping your brain active is important, and I think my grandmother is someone that to look up to with that because she has always kept her brain active, and at 93 she's still going. So I think that shows that that's effective, right? So keeping your brain active in one way or another, right? Doing puzzles, doing different activities. I have had my own clients and patients who were amazing engineers and mathematicians in their life, and they keep their brain active by trying to solve problems that they normally would do in their career. So anything to keep your brain active is great. Practicing gratitude and mindfulness. This is one that is not really talked about a whole lot. It's starting to come into play with the younger generation. So practicing gratitude is really about not just practicing what you're thankful for in your life, but also practicing some self-love as well. So practicing, saying positive things to yourself. I even tell people, look in the mirror so you're actually looking at yourself, but reminding yourself, you are worthy, you are a great person, you're intelligent. Whatever are the positive affirmations and feelings of gratitude that you want to put out there. And then sometimes people will like to include things that they feel grateful for because sometimes life can feel really heavy and we can focus on the negative and not so much on the positive. So sometimes it's, reminding yourself, okay, I'm glad that I'm in decent health, or I'm glad that I still have my kids around. They're absolutely amazing, right? Or I'm really glad that I have these caregivers that take care of me. They're really great. So practicing gratitude in life and gratitude for yourself. And mindfulness is a really interesting one. There's a lot of pieces to mindfulness, and I would encourage anybody who hasn't heard about it to do a quick little Google search on mindfulness, but it's really focused on being present in the current moment because oftentimes we can get so caught up in thinking about the future or so caught up in thinking about the past that we're not really present in the moment right now. So it's about bringing your brain back to the present moment, focusing on what's going on here and now, and enjoying what's going on here and now. And that takes some practice. There's also mindfulness meditations that are really helpful. And I know some people can be skeptical about meditation. It doesn't work for everybody, but it's always worth a try. I've seen my meditation change people's perceptions, change their ability to cope with things like depression and anxiety. So it's definitely worth a try. And of course, seeking professional help. That is so important and something that is often hard for people to do is accept help, look for help. As I said, I'm a therapist part-time, and I will tell you, I have my own therapist as well. Because talking to somebody who has no skin in the game with your mental health is important. It's a neutral person, they're not going to give you opinion, they're going to give you fact, right? Because sometimes when we talk to our friends and family members, it's challenging because they have their own opinions on what we should do or what we shouldn't do, right? So seeking professional help can be really helpful. And I tell people all this all the time, and not just because I'm a therapist, but just because I believe it. I believe that everyone could use therapy at one point or another in their life, even if it's just to talk through some of their frustrations or challenges. It's actually really helpful to talk to somebody that, doesn't have emotional investment into your life. It's also important to seek professional help if you feel like your mental health is getting worse and it's not getting better. So that's really important. Professional help is very, very helpful. So I know we have various people on this webinar today. We have family caregivers, professional caregivers, we have older adults. So I wanted to make sure that I'm addressing all of you. So those of you that are family caregivers, and that could mean even you're caring for a friend, could be chosen family versus biological family. There's a lot of roles you have in making sure that the individual you're caring for has good mental wellness going on, but also it's important for yourself as well. But your role in supporting the person you're taking care of is having regular communication, keeping that door open for that person to tell you, hey, I'm struggling, right? And also that regular communication can be really helpful to make sure that that person feels seen and heard. Helping maintain routines and activities. That is so important because it's hard to throw off somebody's routine, right? It's hard for that person. So maintaining a routine can be helpful for mental wellness. Also, keeping a routine of activities. Maybe that person likes gardening. Maybe once a week you guys go outside and you garden. Or maybe, my grandma loves Dairy Queen. So every once in a while, my dad and I would take her out to go get some Dairy Queen. That was her favorite, one of her favorite activities. So maintaining some joyful activities as well. Being present and listening without judgment. This one is so challenging, right? Especially when we're taking care of a family member because we have all kinds of thoughts on how we think they should do things, right? But it's important to be present and listen without judgment. If they say, like, oh, I'm feeling so sad, not coming back with, well, why are you sad? You have everything you could possibly have in life, and I'm here helping you. So why would you feel sad? Right? That's listening with judgment. You want to listen without judgment, right? If the person says, I'm feeling really sad, you might say, oh, wow, I didn't know that. How can I help support you? Right? And just letting that person talk about what's going on. And then you can help them problem solve what they want to do next. Accompanying people to their appointments. So that is really, really important because as we age, right, our brain cannot take in a whole lot of information, and sometimes we'll forget information. So accompanying your loved one to an appointment is important. It also can help people feel well supported, right? Feel like somebody is there to help guide them through this process. And as many of us know, the healthcare system here in the United States can be complicated. So sometimes you need somebody to help you navigate through the healthcare system. And then, of course, as a family caregiver, it's important to watch for changes in the individual's mood or behavior because that's going to indicate something's going on, right? And at that point, if you notice a significant change, it's important to go talk to the person's doctor to make sure there's nothing physical going on. And then, if not, maybe seeking out some mental health support from a therapist or a counselor. Okay. And of course, professional caregivers have a role as well. And a lot of what I mentioned in the family caregivers also rolls over to professional caregivers as well, because we're working in people's homes or people are living at the place we work. So again, we're in people's homes. I used to be a caregiver for a long time. Uh, it's important as you are working in your career as a caregiver that you are always putting your resident or client first, right? Providing consistent and compassionate care. And when I say consistent, I mean, being there when that person needs you to be there, trying to follow their routine as much as you can. I also recognize that you have schedules and things to do, but trying to do the best you can and compassionate. That is the key. That is the huge key. In all of the years that I've worked in the aging industry, I guess you could say, the best caregivers I have come across are the ones that are the most compassionate, right? Recognizing that any one of us could be in the same shoes as the person we're caring for and treating them in the way that we would want to be treated or we would want our loved ones to be treated, right? So having compassion, being present, monitoring for emotional changes or mental health needs, that's so important and often gets overlooked. And I'm not saying that caregivers need to become experts in mental health. That is outside of the scope of caregiving, but recognizing if somebody's mood has changed, if it's different than what it normally is, right? Or if there's any mental health needs, right? Are you noticing a person becoming more anxious? Are they becoming more withdrawn? So all those warning signs I mentioned earlier, as a professional caregiver, it's important to keep an eye out for those as well. Also, advocating for integrated behavioral health services. And what that means is having behavioral health services that are integrated into the communities, assisted living, nursing communities, all of those types of things. There are some communities that are moving towards partnering with mental health organizations to provide mental health services in the community. I'm sure there are some that might have some on-site mental health staff, but I think there's this big shift towards trying to be able to have behavioral health or mental health professionals available for older adults in their communities. So there are several mental health organizations out there that are catering to just older adults. So they have therapists that are specifically trained in helping older adults with their mental health. Um, Also encouraging socialization and engagement. So as a professional caregiver, it is important that you encourage people to engage in things that they enjoy. So I want to emphasize the piece about what they enjoy, because you don't want to push somebody to go play bingo and they don't like to play bingo, right? That's just going to make them feel worse. So you want to encourage them to do things that they like to do. And then using a trauma-informed, person-driven approach. I know that's a lot of words, so let me back up. Um, Using a trauma-informed approach, that is recognizing that there may be traumas that people have experienced. And you may have even heard about them, because I know when I was a caregiver, I had lots of good conversations with my residents. So I know sometimes they can tell us things that um, maybe they've experienced some traumatic events. Maybe they're a veteran and they were deployed, right? Then they've more than likely experienced traumatic events. And so recognizing that those may be a part of that person's life and identifying, are there things in their life that may activate some of their trauma related symptoms? Are there things that they've been through that make them wary of doing certain things? So really recognizing that. And the person-driven approach, that's huge. That's really what we need to do in every healthcare realm is person-driven care. You may have heard the word person-centered care, which is similar. Person-centered care looks at making sure you put the person in the center of their care. So if you had like a visual, you'd have the person in the middle, and then stemming off of them would be, their doctor, their caregivers, um, all the people that work with them, right, would be stemming off of this circle. So all of these people around them are taking care of that person and making sure that that person's needs are met and what they want is what they're getting. Person driven includes everything that I talked about with person centered, but also means that person is in the driver's seat when it comes to their care, right? So they get to decide how they want to proceed with their care. Of course, if they have the ability to. So when you look at person-driven approaches, it's, if somebody say they go to their primary doctor and their doctor says, I want you to cut down on eating sugar because we don't want you to get diabetes. Well, that person has the ability to choose whether they want to cut down sugar or not. Of course, there's consequences if they don't, but they get that choice. The doctor cannot tell them, you can't do this, right? We're adults, we're human beings, we get to make our own decisions. So it's important that the person drives the journey. Now, if a person is not wanting to do something that may be beneficial to them, then providing them some education. Well, this is what, this is the benefit of doing this. This is what might happen if you don't. And then that person can make an educated decision on what they want, right? And same goes with caregivers, right? For example, when you're getting somebody ready in the morning, instead of just picking out their outfit, taking them to the closet and saying, okay, what do we want to wear today? Right? Offering that option. And I know that seems so simple, and some of you are probably going, well, why wouldn't you let the person choose their own outfit? But I have seen that in various settings that I've been in, is the caregiver choosing things for the person versus the person getting the ability to choose it. So really letting that person drive the care that they're getting. Okay. And then just want to quickly go over some risk factors and protective factors for suicide. As I mentioned in the beginning, people who are 85 and up are at highest risk for suicide. But one of the shocking um, pieces of data that I found in my research was 22% of all suicides in the US, that means all ages, are older adults 65 and up. 22%. That's a big, big percentage, right? So it's definitely a huge deal and it's a huge thing to pay attention to. So when we look at risk factors, we have, as I mentioned earlier, isolation, untreated depression, chronic illness and pain, and loss of purpose. And those are similar to what I had mentioned in the beginning of risk factors for mental decline. So these are things to really pay attention to when it comes to suicide prevention. And protective factors. Protective factors are the things that make a person at less risk. These are the things that are supportive to them. So having social support, whether it be family, friends, even caregivers, access to care is important, right? Um, Even our individuals that live at home and maybe can only get the few hours of caregiving that Medicaid allows them to have. And so not having the amount of support that they need, right? Having a sense of purpose is a protective factor, and connectedness. And I did a presentation a few months ago on suicide prevention, and I asked, what is the best intervention for suicide prevention? And, people think of, therapy or, going to the hospital or whatever. And that's not the best intervention, right? The best intervention is connectedness, people feeling like they're connected to their families, their friends, their community. That is a huge protective factor. So, how do you ask about suicide? And this is both for professional caregivers, family caregivers, and even older adults, because you may be asking somebody that you know, okay? It's very important to be very straightforward when you're asking. Are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about killing yourself? Because if you ask any other question, your answer may not be direct on what you're looking for, right? If you say, are you thinking about harming yourself? That's a very different question, right? Because harm doesn't equal suicide. So it's really important to be specific about your questioning. And I just want to point out, because there's this huge myth that's been going on for forever, that asking about suicide puts the thought in the person's head. That is 100% not true. If the person was thinking about it, they were thinking about it before you asked. And so asking them is not going to put the thought in their head. And it's important, if the person's experiencing any sort of mental health decline or experiencing suicide, to get professional help. That is super, super important. Therapy or counseling, psychiatric support, which are psychiatrists. They do a lot of prescribing medications if needed, but they also do counseling. Support groups are excellent. It's always nice to talk to people who are going through similar struggles. Talking to your doctor about your mental health concerns. But the really important thing that I want you guys to take out of this presentation is early intervention leads to better outcomes. So if you as the individual are experiencing mental health symptoms, talking to someone about it early is important because it can get deeper than it needs to be, right? And also this is for the caregivers. Early intervention is super helpful. So asking people, are you okay? How are you doing? But really listening to how they're doing. And if you notice signs of depression, making sure that they get the support they need is important. So how do you find resources in your community? Um, Google is great. However, Google is very broad. And so Google can sometimes give you resources that may not be great or may not be helpful. So I always encourage people check in with your local senior center. They often have resources for mental health. Faith-based groups, there's a lot more faith-based groups that are focusing on mental health, a lot of churches, a lot of other faith-based groups. Um, Almost everywhere they have an area agency on aging, and those agencies provide resources for older adults. Um, Mental health clinics that specialize in geriatrics, they're hard to find. I won't lie. They are hard to find. I've seen the VA snatching up the geriatric mental health professionals to make sure that they have the proper support. Um, but there are definitely some out there that do specialize in older adults. And then support groups. And this goes for both the caregivers and older adults. There are lots of support groups out there for various things. So connecting with support groups can be very important. So let's normalize mental wellness. If you take anything away from this presentation, I want it to be that mental health is supposed to be talked about. It's important to be talked about. And I hope this opens up a dialogue for you guys on talking about mental health. It's just as important as physical health. Caring relationships are protective factors that can save a life, and everyone has a role in mental health support and suicide prevention. And when I say everyone, I mean every single one of you that are on this webinar have a role in mental health support and suicide prevention, even if that role is just talking about it, right? Just being open about it so people feel comfortable talking about it. So some of the resources that you can access, and this PowerPoint will be sent out, so you guys will have these resources, but these are all great resources for mental health and for suicide prevention. So the big one I want to point out is the 988 crisis line. This is not just for suicide. This is for any sort of crisis, or if you feel like emotions are getting high and you need someone to talk to, 988. You can call, text, or they have a chat on their website, 988lifeline.org. And all you have to dial are the numbers 988. And that is amazing. 988 rolled out a couple of years ago, and it has been a game changer. We used to have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and it was okay, but it needed to be improved and expanded. And with 988, it was expanded and improved quite a bit because the previous Lifeline had some pretty long wait times, but 988 does not. So that's a great resource. SAMHSA is a great resource. It's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration. um, the National Alliance on Mental Health, also known as NAMI, and there's a NAMI chapter in almost every city, state. So you can reach out to your local NAMI chapter. The National Institute of Mental Health, um, the National Domestic Violence Hotline. If you are being abused by someone close to you, call the Domestic Violence Hotline or go to the hotline.org and they have a chat function there. Also, some great places to get resources, the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. They have peer-to-peer support. So these are people who have also experienced anxiety and depression, and they're there to help support. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, great resource. They are absolutely excellent. They put on different events, but they also have great resources. And if you live near a major city, they have their Out of the Darkness walk every year, and you can join a group or walk by yourself. And then the crisis text line is great. Like I said, you can text 988, but you also can text the crisis text line. You text home to 741 741. And of course, as I said, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, great, great, great resource. And if you want to be trained on how to support people with mental health challenges, mental health first aid is a really excellent training. It's sponsored by the National Council for Mental Wellbeing, but there are trainers across the globe for mental health first aid. So if you want to be trained in how to support people or learn more about mental health, check that out and see if it's something you want to engage in. So, a few things to remember. Asking does not put the thought of suicide in someone's head. Support is essential when someone is dealing with mental health challenges, and you can make a difference just by being present and offering a listening ear. You literally could save a life just by that. And I love Mr. Rogers. I grew up with Mr. Rogers, and I could watch Mr. Rogers anytime, even at the age of, I'll be 33 on Friday. Um, anything that's human is mentionable. Anything that's mentionable can be manageable. When we talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. Love Mr. Rogers. He always has great things to say. That is the end of my presentation. So, Angie, I guess you had mentioned Q&A.
Yes, thank you so much. Christina, if you'd like to stop sharing your screen,
Cool.
we do have quite a few, as you can see, of our team members, but we also have 33 folks that are attending outside of Prestige in our privacy room. And so they did have some questions that came in the Q&A that I'd like to share with you. And maybe you can help with some advice for them. The first one is from Debbie, and it says, I am 84 years old and I lost my son at 58. He was 58 years old. Is it too late? This was a year ago. Is it too late for me to talk to someone about this in counseling? I've thought the grief would be better by now. Hmm.
Uh, well, I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your son. That is an incredibly challenging loss that nobody is ever prepared to experience. And no, it's not too late for you to talk to someone about it. It is never too late to talk to a therapist or a counselor about what you're going through. They are there to help support you through whatever is going on in your life and however long ago it was. And I will say that the first year is the hardest grief you will probably experience. It generally goes up from here. It generally gets better, but it does take a long time depending on the loss you're experiencing, right? Losing a son at that age that he was, it's not expected. So there's no timeline for grief. It and the grief is always there. It just kind of gets smaller and smaller, right? That grief is a expression of your love for your son. So it's always going to be there. But I would definitely encourage you to talk to someone about it.
Thanks, Christina. Also, I have some of our Prestige attendees that have raised their hand. If you could also put your question in the chat box, and then we could answer those questions. Another question that we have, how do I deal with the constant fear of death and dying as I age?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would encourage you to definitely reach out to a therapist if you can find one that specializes in older adults. That's helpful. But that anxiety around death and dying, it comes at all ages. I have had clients who have been even in their 20s and 30s having anxiety about death and dying. So, going to therapy is really helpful for it. It really comes down to digging a little bit deeper into where does that fear come from? And that's something you can work on with a therapist.
The next one is many times I have difficulty with my mom being angry and irritable around me when I think she has everything to live for and life is good for her. How can I encourage her? What ways can she be happier?
Well, there's definitely almost always an underlying cause for that anger, right? And even if you have everything that maybe you could want in life, there could be something else going on. So I would encourage an open conversation to just say, "Hey, Mom, I see things are feeling pretty hard for you. What's going on?" And if she's not willing to open up to you, again, mental health professional might be good because it's somebody that's outside the family. Because sometimes people can feel uncomfortable telling their family members that they're struggling. Or since she's your mom, sometimes people don't want to talk to their children about their problems because they feel like they need to be strong for their children.
And I know for myself with my mom who's 84, it's hard to talk about those things that we didn't grow up knowing about. They were private to them and our parents between them, and then it's hard for them to talk about those. And even that trauma-informed care that you talked about of traumas that have happened in the past but that we didn't know about as adult children. And so those conversations can be really, really difficult. And so I appreciate the encouragement to get help for that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Another question, and we do have one from one of our communities. Jennifer asked how to get residents early in the morning to participate in exercise. Do you have any recommendations? I think really at any time during the day, not just in the morning, but really encouraging our residents to get out for exercise. Is there a way to, or words to say that really would encourage them in that way?
Well, first of all, I would get to know the person and what they enjoy, because maybe the physical activity that's being offered is not something that they enjoy. Also, paying attention to people's physical limitations as well. So tailoring the exercise to whatever their physical limitation is, and then offering it at multiple times of the day, because some people are not morning people, some people are not afternoon people, some people are evening people, right? So if it's possible, offering it at different times a day, and I know it's not always possible to do that in the same day, but maybe throughout the week you have it at different times and different activities. Maybe even polling your residents to see what kinds of activities they like to do and seeing, what you can offer them. I think that'd be a great idea.
One of our anonymous attendees said, give them all Red Bulls. I don't know that we want to do that with all the caffeine that is in those, but
Right.
yeah. Also, another question, how important is regular sleep for our mental health?
Super important, more important than I think anybody recognized. I actually went to a suicidology conference in May, and it was really interesting. They were talking about how sleep really impacts the mental health, and how, a lot of the therapists that were presenting there said that sleep was something that they assess when somebody expresses thoughts of suicide or depression, because lack of sleep can make it so your brain is just not functioning at 100%. And so then your brain has less ability to cope with the stressors of life. So sleep is really, really important. Although the amount of sleep can decrease as we age. So just paying attention to, do you think you're getting enough sleep? Are you waking up refreshed? Do you feel tired throughout the day? Those kinds of things. Or if there's any changes in your mood.
Thank you. I think also in our communities, uninterrupted sleep, I think, is really important too. Many times, we will go in and wake up our residents to take them to the bathroom in the middle of the night, or maybe change a brief or disposable underwear if they are incontinent. And I think there's many studies who show us that interrupted sleep is very dangerous for our residents and for their brain and their mental health. And so, while we want to provide the best care and not see skin breakdown, we also have to be mindful of the quality of sleep too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Also, can medication be a good thing to use with our residents with mental health needs?
It would depend on the person and what they need. That would definitely be a question to ask either the person's primary care physician or if they have a psychiatrist on board, asking the psychiatrist. Medication can be helpful in some situations, but it varies person to person, so it's important to talk to medical professionals about that one.
Very good. Thank you. And how do we get them excited to come out and see singers and entertainment and get residents involved in more activities in our community?
Yeah, similar to what I was saying with the exercise, it's really important to understand what people enjoy because sometimes people don't like to be in groups or they don't like to, listen to music live or they don't like the loud noises. So it's really important to understand each resident's preferences and what they enjoy. Because oftentimes, and I've seen this a lot in my career in the older adult realm, is oftentimes we're trying to push people to do things that they don't want to do. And so it's really important you get to know your residents individually and what they like to do individually and not push them to do things that they're not interested in or don't feel comfortable doing.
Very good. And one of the questions is, I feel like I've lost my purpose in life. How can I renew purpose?
Absolutely. This comes up a lot and not just with my older adult population, but my clients who have disabilities as well. It's hard when you feel like you've lost your sense of purpose. So a couple of things come to mind. Volunteering, if that's something that you're able to do. Going to your local senior center. Oftentimes they have great communities you can get involved with. They have volunteer opportunities as well. But also if you live in a community, like an assisted living community type place, then talking to the staff, seeing if there's something that you could do to help out around the community, if that's something you want to do. But start thinking about what are the things that you enjoy doing and what are things that maybe used to bring you purpose, and how can you kind of adjust those things to fit in the life that you have now.
Thank you. And I mean, as a plug for Prestige, I will say that, we have our 6 areas of wellness that we really like to center our activities and our resident experience around. And, we talked about socialization on the webinar today. And so part of that is making new friends. And that can be really scary. It's kind of like when you're in high school getting picked for the team. So we have ways to engage with making new friends. We also want to find how you can express yourself, and sharing your talents in the community. And that can also give you purpose within our communities. And we have so many talented residents who live with us and lead groups and find purpose in that. Also expanding our mind, keeping it exercised through different mental health activities and brain activities. But also making a difference as part of our 6. And so we do things like, we have knitting and crocheting groups to make beanies for new babies in the hospital. We've had teams who go out to the local food bank, making things for the homeless shelter, just that volunteerism. One of our communities has some folks that are going out to the local park and painting, some of the equipment there at the park for local kids. And it's a matter of just asking questions, maybe at your Chamber of Commerce or local city council, to find out what are ways that our residents can participate in those kinds of things. And talents can begin as you age too. I mean, we found residents who have never painted before, because of changes in their brain, now they're much more artistic, and they find that is an important part of who they are. And music, I mean, we love music. We're seeing, proms in our communities, and they love disco music, and this whole new generation. We are finding that this generation we're serving right now are really involved in wanting adventure. They want lifelong learning. They want to be challenged, and they want to find joy in life every day. And yes, many of our residents, like you've said, isolation, they got used to it during the pandemic, and sometimes it's hard to get them out of their apartments. And it really has to be, I love that word you used, resident driven, person driven. And so when we get to know those residents, whether it's through their life story or, ways that we talk with them and interview them and ask those questions, that's how we work and how we should be working in our communities. And we love it when people come in from outside of our communities to participate in activities to kind of get the feel and get comfortable, because maybe it's going to a gym is intimidating for you, but maybe coming to one of our communities to do exercise might be a little more comfortable. And so we look at those kinds of things too, to meet the needs of our aging population. But let me see if we do have one more question here. Let me see what that is. One of our residents is almost legally blind, but wants to crochet and learn how to teach them when they can't see very well. And I think, I don't know if you have any recommendations on that, Christina, but I think, it's very tactile and a lot of times you can learn through the feel. And I know I'm at the place where when I crochet, I can watch TV and just still crochet.
Yeah.
If you have any other answers to that.
Absolutely. I mean, just like Angie said, you can show them through touch and feel, but also using verbal instruction. So telling them, you can help them, put the knitting needles in their hands, help them with setting it up, but then walking them through, like, take the right one and do this. There are also resources out there for low vision, or individuals with blindness. So a quick Google search. I know I said Google isn't always your friend, but when it comes to these types of resources, it can be. Just a quick Google search to find what's in your community. Oops, I'm sorry, that was my Google. Um, so yeah, so connecting with whatever services there are, because there are also some services if that person likes to read or listen to audiobooks, there's some services out there for people with vision issues. Those send like audiobooks and a little like CD or tape player to play those on. So there's resources. So try reaching out to those and seeing. Also, the local senior center might have some information as well, or the area agency on aging.
Thank you. And I know some libraries also have programs that they can come to your
Yes.
community or share things as well. So.
So
Well, Christina, I think that is all of our questions. I'm so grateful for you to being with us today, and all the knowledge that you shared and just helpful real life, like you said, down to earth ways to engage with our residents, our family members, being a caregiver and working through the process, being a good listener, asking questions. And so I really appreciate you being with us today. Everyone who's attended, we will be sending out the link to the recording for today's webinar, as well as Christina's slides. And if you have any questions for us, or you'd like to see a little more about what Prestige does, you can always go to prestigecare.com, our website, and look at our locations. But we're always here for you as a resource. We try to hold these webinars every quarter. And so we are really grateful to you, Christina, for being a part of this one for the month of July and this quarter. And we wish you all the best, and as you take your information and knowledge out to others. And we look forward to participating with you in the future. So thanks everyone for attending today. And we will email you in the next day or two with all those links. So thank you so much and have a great day. Bye-bye.
thank you.